So if you're familiar with this guy,
I'm sure many of you guys can relate to this, but one particular challenge is...
then you're probably going to be familiar with this idea that we're going to talk about today, which is enharmonic properties of diminished seventh chords, specifically fully diminished seventh chords. Essentially, the fundamental idea is really simple. We have a chord that is extremely harmonically unstable or unstable. We have a chord that can really move in any number of different tonic directions. And the best way that we're able to do that is simply by moving one of the pitches a half step and then redirecting the rest to follow in accordance with the tonality that we're trying to reach. So for example, any one of the tones from a fully diminished seventh chord can be pushed up a semitone to a new tonic area. So for example, if you have a G sharp fully diminished seventh chord, that fundamental of that G sharp fully diminished seventh chord can be pushed up to an A, and then you're in the tonic of A major or minor, depending on the different chords you use to then redirect the tonality. The case is also the truth if you try to use the same fully diminished seventh chord to push towards that A, but then made it a dominant A, in which case you could then lead yourself into the tonalities of perhaps D or E. There's also the case where you could then use the fully diminished seventh chord to push towards another fully diminished seventh chord or a chord that is equally harmonically unstable. Tchaikovsky really only gives us two rules to deal with these different types of changes in tonality from the fully diminished seventh chord. The first one is if we're leading it to a generally new tonic area, you simply take whatever the fundamental of that fully diminished seventh chord is up the semitone, while all of the other voices would then move down by step motion to then get to the intervals of the approach triad that we're trying to reach. Each one of these movements can then be directed in whichever way that we would like. However, what's most important to note is that in functional harmony, it seems rather apparent that the fully diminished seventh chord is unique amongst all the precipitous chords that have been covered at this point, for the pure fact that it is able to be harmonically directed in whatever direction we so choose, so long as we have a clear idea of tonality that we're moving towards, since when we arrive at a fully diminished seventh chord, we remove ourselves so much from tonality that we can now put ourselves in any direction that we might like. The exercise that's recommended to us by Tchaikovsky is simply an analysis of these different types of chord structures and movements between different tonalities, as well as identifying different types of fully diminished seventh chords and the ways in which they can be resolved into different tonic triads and also different dominant seventh sonorities.